Hello, everyone. It is December 3rd and time for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis. I'm Brian Walton, and this is my partner, Kyle Reis. Welcome, Kyle.
Hello, Brian. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Hey, because you're watching and or listening to us, you obviously found us this week. But the new news is, and we want you to help get the word out to everybody, that our podcast stream has moved. We're available now on all the major podcast apps. So you can find us at um, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio. And if you need the links, just come to the Cardinal Nation. There's an article up. There's an area there that you can click on and subscribe to our feed. Plus, we have a cool new logo that Kyle
Yes.
approves, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. I love a good it feels very Americana to me, Brian. It's got a feel to it that it feels both traditional and classic and uh would fit in with every era of Cardinal baseball, I think.
There you go. And as always, we're committed to come to you every Wednesday. And so, now it's a matter of, getting out to more folks. And by the way, the video form will still be posted at thecardinalnation.com each week if worst comes to worst. But you can also find the video on YouTube and on Spotify. The Amazon, Apple, and iHeart will be audio only. And for some, that's easier, obviously easier on your eyes. And that's something you can do when you're in the car. So, or, out taking a run or whatever.
Yeah, perfect. And is anything that's easier on the eyes, especially when it comes to this side of the co-hosting, the better, Brian.
You got that right. It's funny, when I actually publish this, they provide me three different snapshots of us, and usually one of them I either like have my eyes closed or you're going like this, or there's something going on. It's like, well, we can't use that one, but we do
Sounds
have a lot of
right.
fun.
Sounds right. Yeah, sometimes I'm a little animated and it's easy to catch us right at the wrong moment, Brian.
There you go. Well, let's get into business. Um, on Tuesday, there was some very interesting news that came out, some very positive news. I mean, it's negative in a way because it's a byproduct of where the Cardinals are on the field and attendance wise and revenue wise. But the Cardinals received a competitive round B pick in the 2026 draft, an extra pick, which is right now is 32nd overall. And that is obviously good news for a team that's trying to restock itself during the draft. I was happy to see it. I'm sure you were as well.
Oh, Brian, it's exciting. Now, am I wrong? There's a chance that that pick could move back, right? Or it could move up, or is it set in 32? I probably should have done a little bit more
Well, it's
research.
going to depend on if any penalties for signing qualifying offers,
That's
and
yeah,
those that isn't set yet. So it is the fourth. It is the fourth pick in the competitive round B whenever that begins.
that's it. And that's exciting. And of course, we'll get into a little bit of draft minutia here. The one caveat that it all comes with is sometimes it's not about being able to select 32nd overall or 34th or 20th, or it's about the slot money, the bonus money that comes along with that pick. The Cardinals have been very savvy about using. Now, last year, we'll get into that a little bit. Last year, they didn't use all of their bonus. They didn't go up to the amount like they have in the past. But it adds them, it gives them a little bit more flexibility to get creative with that pick or with the next pick or with the first overall pick or, with the first round pick. It gives them flexibility, which says nothing for the fact that whatever player you're going to get at that pick, that fourth pick in the comp round A, is going to be obviously a very promising, a very gifted young man when they're drafted.
And to what you're saying, I didn't look up the exact amount, but it's going to be a couple $1 million. So I mean,
Yes,
it's not trivial, and it's sort of like the opposite of when they had to give up draft picks, not that long ago, and give up international picks as well. So it's nice that the pendulum swung the other way. Now, the other piece of draft news that's coming, and it'll be on the 9th, so next Tuesday. So we'll talk about it next week. Is the draft lottery. And the Cardinals, have an entry. This is about selecting the first six picks in the 2026 draft. After that, it falls in, win-loss percentages. The Cardinals have a low shot, like under like 2.5% or something like that, to get the number one pick. But the hope is, of course, that they can draw their way into the first six picks.
yeah, yeah, and even if, of course, that where it also gets really interesting. Now, I guess I'm rambling on myself already. It's believed that the top end of this draft is actually pretty solid. Now, of course, this will all change by the time you get to the 2026 draft in actuality.
When you say
So
top end, how far down do you mean?
I think like when you're talking about like the top 10 picks, whether they be collegiate bats or high school bats or collegiate arms, I think it's kind of thought of entering the 2026 prep and collegiate season as being pretty strong at the top end, top 10 or 15 picks as compared to maybe what we've seen in the last couple of years. So I guess the other thing is even if the Cardinals don't get a top 6 pick, then if they don't find their way into the draft lottery, if they could get 7, then that would allow them to be to get a top a lottery pick the following year, and then the following year after that. So it's going to be a lot of fun this particular year for the Cardinals to see where they slot in when the ball finally when those balls finally drop, when they finally find their home. So there's a little extra intrigue there this year than I think we've had in a couple years, and I'm really excited about that.
And
So.
in worst place, I think their record was like 11th, maybe
Mhm.
11th worst, something like that. So, they're still going to get an early pick, even if they don't, fare well in the draft lottery. At this point, it's only upside. And again, this new competitive round A, I said B earlier, but you corrected me. That competitive round, A pick dropping in there between the first and second round, again, is, another positive.
Yeah, and Brian, I did look it up as you were talking, and last year the 32nd overall pick belonged to the Brewers. It was there. It was a compensatory pick for Willie Adames signing elsewhere. And that pick was the bonus pool attached to that was 2.97 and then some change $1 million. So that's an extra. I mean, even if that falls down a little bit, even if they draft 34th or 36th or however it ends up turning out with the picks ahead of them, that's that's a lot of money to allocate, it within the draft, whether that be a seventh rounder in Peyton Graham or Andrew Dukanich or whatever it ends up being, a third rounder who is a prep arm or a prep bat that slips down. It's really exciting. Or you never know. Maybe the Cardinals, as we're talking about where they might fall in the draft lottery, maybe they draft ninth and there's a prep player that slides out of the top 5, and all of a sudden you have an extra $1 million to work with to keep that prep player away from college. It's just such an important thing for them. And also, now that we're seeing them flex their scouting muscle in a little different way, it's just really exciting to have that pick there as well.
Yeah. So, watch the space again, as I mentioned, after the lottery occurs as part of the owners meetings, we'll be talking about it here next week. Another thing that happened this week is the Cardinals finalized their major league staff. And of course, the rumors are out that the Cardinals are trying to extend Oliver Marmol, who, at this point would be a lame duck, and that, has its own set of challenges. People feel very strongly about Marmol one way or the other, but he's going to be back for 2026 and potentially longer. Basically, all the coaches have stayed, but they made a couple of changes. They brought up Casey Chenoweth, who was the assistant hitting coach, who is the new assistant hitting coach. He was Springfield's hitting coach and has a lot of experience outside of the traditional organizations. He worked in Arizona and San Francisco systems, but he has certification with Driveline, Marucci Bat Performance, On Base, and Rapsodo. So it's obvious that Casey understands the new technologies. You're aware of him being an impact maker with some of the young hitters coming up, right?
Yeah, it sounds like one of the things that he really excels in is he doesn't try to change a hitter. He's very focused on trying to get the most out of what a hitter is. I know Joshua Baez has talked about some of the impact that he's had on the turnaround that Joshua Baez had in 2025. I know one of the headliners will be Jordan Walker. Remember, Jordan Walker went on the IL, started an IL rehab stint in Springfield. Well, he worked hand in hand with Casey Chenoweth to get in a more athletic position. And when he came back up to the majors after that IL stint, Jordan Walker was almost starting to flash the hitter that we saw in the second half of the 2023 season, his rookie season. And then, of course, he fell back to some of his old habits, and it's easier to changing is easier said than done. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of what the organization continues to promise is working with players to bring out the best in them. And when you're talking about a guy like Casey Chenoweth, who is, like you said, he's well schooled in a lot of the modern technologies, a lot of the modern concepts. And when you're starting to bring up the next round of prospects that have only ever been exposed to that, they probably have had tough coaches and the old school baseball mentality, but they've only ever been exposed to that. He's going to end up being an important part of the connecting tissue, the fabric that is going to extend from the minor leagues to the major leagues to get the most out of these kids as they enter the major leagues. There's going to be continuity there for them to rely on that I think is going to be huge. And of course, with results to prove it.
Now, and the Cardinals also added or made a change and have a new assistant pitching coach. And this is a gentleman named Kyle Driscoll. I didn't know about him before he was hired, but he was the minor league pitching coordinator for the Diamondbacks most recently. But he's also worked outside of the traditional game with Cressey Sports Performance. Cressey's a big name. A lot of the guys have trained with him as well. So he'll be working alongside the regular pitching coach Dusty Blake.
Yeah, and I think it's just more sign that they're willing to go in any direction to try to improve, I guess, to create their own culture. I say to improve. I was going to say to improve the culture, but I don't think that that's fair. I think it's that they're recreating a culture that fits the direction they want to go in. To see them go to Pittsburgh and bring in somebody from Pittsburgh in the organization, to go to Arizona, to bring in somebody from Arizona into the organization. I don't think they're necessarily just mining those hotbeds of player development. I think that they're being very purposeful on the coaching, the instructors that they're targeting, and I think it's really, really good.
There you go. And another change that happened that wasn't an announcement by the Cardinals, but Jose Laher, who had been a very successful manager at Springfield, was manager of the year in the Texas League a couple years back. And then he was the assistant field coordinator and base running coordinator this last year in the Cardinals system. Jose Laher, and then before that, he ran the Cardinals Dominican Academy. Jose Laher was hired by the White Sox as their first base coach, which is a nice move for him. I will tell you that talking to any coach and every coach in the minor leagues, their goal is one thing, just like the players, and that is, how do I get to the majors? I remember that the Cardinals had a AAA manager. I won't mention his name, but he spent some time on the major league staff as well. And, I asked him, hey, do you miss being back in the minor leagues where you were in charge? You were the CEO. He looked at me like I had three heads and said, you're an idiot.
Yeah,
Being in the majors is where you want to go. So that's where Jose Laher is going to be coaching first base for the White Sox.
yeah, Brian, and good for him. That's a well-respected coach in the organization, a well-respected instructor who did a really good job of creating a lot of contacts outside of the Cardinals organization. But I just think the handful or so of players that I've talked to over the years that have played underneath him, they talk about how fair he is, how devoted to the players he is, how he'll die, quote unquote, die for the players. I mean, I think about in the last 4 or 5 years, Brian, uh, all of the times that I've seen minor league coaches, whether it be for the Cardinals or elsewhere, get fired up, and really he would do it more than anyone. Like, he was the one who you would see out there maybe arguing a little bit more or getting fired up a little bit more, and that's his passion. He is passionate about coaching and teaching, and it came across even in the bad moments and the good moments.
And that reminds me, when you say passionate moments, one of the things that I do periodically is report on what's going on in winter ball. And for whatever reason, the Cardinals have many fewer players this year playing overseas. And I'm talking about Mexico, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Dominican Republic. However, one very interesting person has surfaced, and that is manager Yadier Molina, who was successful managing the Dominican Republic a couple years ago. And in Venezuela, one of the teams, Magallanes, fired their manager about 2 weeks into the 3 weeks into the season, and Molina got brought in, and he's already been ejected a couple of times. And I have on the website one of the videos where he was particularly vigorous in protesting a strikeout of one of his hitters. So Molina's not ready to coach for the Cardinals. They, as I said, they finalized the major league staff. Yadier's not on it, but he's continuing to try to build his portfolio for whatever his next opportunity is going to be.
Yachty's crazy, Brian. He's he's like, I mean, it's entertaining to watch from afar. I can imagine it being entertaining to watch as a player of his, and a fan in the stands. But Like you said, I think it just proves that there's still some maybe, but I don't want to say maturation because I'm sure he'll beat me up. He'll find me and beat me up and yell at me. But there's still some maturation in the managing side of his game.
Well, there's it's not just the work on the field. The manager is really the face of the franchise. He's available every day, before every game, after every game, and that dealing with the media and dealing with the questions is something that a player like Molina is probably not going to have a lot of patience for. I think Albert, who is of course in the mix for a number of managerial jobs, he didn't get any of them, but Albert, I think has is a little calmer. And he's also spent some time broadcasting and doing some other thing and working in MLB. So he's kind of building that broader perspective. In the case of Molina, there was talk every year about how we're going to bring him into the front office and see how the front office works, and it just never materialized.
Yeah, Brian, I'm thinking the thing that I keep laughing about is just the idea of Yadier Molina on like a Zoom press conference. And I remember one time Benjamin Hockman asked John Mozeliak something, and Mozeliak was like, "Hey, I could tell you to jump out of a car, and that doesn't mean you have to jump out of a car." I think Yadier Molina might pull somebody out of a car and or throw a water bottle at somebody driving a car or something like that at this point if asked the inappropriate question. So no, everything you said is dead on, and the hijink, like you said, there's a temperament thing, a huge temperament difference between Yadier Molina and Albert Pujols, at least as far as like it's been presented to the mass public at this point in their post playing career.
On the other hand, I think Yadier Molina might be one of the greatest pitching coaches of all time if he chose to go that route. Now, maybe his ego is such, he wants to be the top guy, but what Molina knows about pitching and certainly knows at catching, that would be a tremendous role for him. I don't know if he'll ever end there or whether he has to manage a while and then go back to it or what. I mean, there's guys like Bud Black who have done both jobs, so it's not crazy, but I think Molina would definitely have a lot to offer to a major league team. I'm just not sure if the manager job's the best fit.
I'm with you, Brian. I'm with you. Again, in my mind, I just keep playing out these scenarios where what's it, like even as a pitching coach, watching Yachty lose his mind at balls and strike calls from the dugout. Like that's just because that's kind of what it is right now.
Yeah. All right. So another thing that has been going on, there's been a lot of talk in the rumor mill about the offseason and will Brendan Donovan be traded? And I think you know, people have very strong opinions one way or another about whether Donovan should stay and be a cornerstone or whether he should help further the next go round. We're not going to solve that here. We don't have any say in it. But it does signal to the game that the Cardinals are open for business, and it really enables them to have a lot of discussions, and hopefully that will accelerate progress on trades of guys that maybe they're more inclined to trade for, because I don't think they're going to trade Brendan Donovan unless they're really, really blown away with an offer. They get a top 15 or 20 prospect in baseball or something like that. But it does enable them to have discussions about other guys, whether Nolan Gorman or whoever it may be.
Yeah, pivot. They can pivot to Lars Nootbaar. They can pivot into whatever direction they need to. They have options. Brian, I think that's one of the fascinating things about this offseason. They just have options. They have players that will be attractive to other teams at varying levels, and it's funny because they have so many left-handed bats, and Donovan and Burleson. The reporting will tell you that they seem the least likely, at least inclined to trade, unless they are blown away by Bulk. But they're
And of
all
course,
left-handed.
those are the players most in demand. Why? Because other players had a good year last year. What a surprise! Other
Yeah,
teams want the best players.
yeah, and a track record of progress. And but the good news there is because all of these guys are left-handed bats that do everything a little bit different, kind of like it's easy to pivot in trade talks. It's easy to say, oh, okay, we're not making progress on Brendan Donovan, but you're looking for a left-handed bat who's patient and can hit at the top of the order. Here's Lars Nootbaar. Yeah, it allows them to pivot and kind of adjust. Of course, the other big news today was that, as reported by Katie Wu of The Athletic, is that Willson Contreras might be a little bit more open to waiving his no trade clause to go somewhere else. So it's just another piece. And Brian, what were your thoughts about that when you heard that? Were you surprised by that, or?
No, not really. I mean, but again, what my thought was is what player is going to say, anything other than I want to stay where I am.
Yeah,
I mean, you'd have to be really disgruntled to say, yeah, get me out of here.
yeah,
And so, it's everybody is trying to say the politically correct things. And Willson Contreras might go. Certainly, then Burleson becomes your first baseman, and maybe lose a ton. Cardinals save money, whatever. I'm more intrigued, still about what's going to happen with Nolan Arenado because last year Arenado kind of held the cards, and he waited and waited and waited and waited, and he waited too long, obviously. This year, he's not as interesting as a third base option, and there's free agents out there, and there's a lot of people speculating there may be nowhere for him to go, and maybe he has to stay, and that leads people to this idea. Well, they're going to DFA him. Cardinals are just going to cut him and eat his contract, and that got a lot of talk on social media, and I think that's crazy. And Chaim Bloom was asked about it, and he said that's not an option. But yet some people are still on the idea. Well, they're going to, if they can't trade him, they're just going to cut him. I can't see that happening.
Yeah, they just don't have a reason to. If you're going to pay him and you're not trying, like they're trying to win, they're trying to stay competitive, but there's no reason to just cut him loose. There just isn't. There's a chance he rebuilds some of his value and you can trade him at the deadline to a place he wants to go. Like there's just no reason to do it because he's still a draw. Any way you cut it, even if he's struggling, he's still Nolan Arenado. There's still kids who are going to want to go see Nolan Arenado or watch Nolan Arenado on television because of the cachet that comes with his name. There's no reason with the situation that the Cardinals are in right now to DFA him in any way, even if it makes sense for what's going on the field to get JJ Weatherhold up, whatever it might be.
And they don't have to pay him until the season's right. Major league players get paid during the season; they don't get paid in the off season.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if they're going to DFA him, they could wait and DFA him in March. I mean,
Yeah.
and chances are by March, the market will be set.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's going to stay that long, but the market will be set, and some third baseman is going to get hurt in spring training, and somebody's going to need to stop. One of the contenders is going to need a stopgap. So,
Yeah.
I think this will all work. It just takes time, and it's still early in the off season. So it's not something that I'm spending any time worrying about myself.
Yeah, Brian, I think the way that you started that with, there are a lot of third basemen that are on the market, a lot of interesting third basemen that nearly every team that's in the market for a third baseman is going to target one of that group. Alex Bregman. That there's a situation where Alex Bohm from the Phillies would be intriguing to other teams as well if they're willing to move him if they were to bring in Alex Bregman. So just to your point, don't think that we're going to get into the winter meetings and some team's going to say, I want Nolan Arenado.
No.
It'll be after those dominoes start to fall, which means we're going to have to be patient, and the Cardinals and their new brass will have to be advantageous.
And maybe Bloom will work a multiplayer trade and take on somebody else's bad contract as part of it. There are a lot of ways this could go, and it'll be very interesting to see how this winter plays out. The first move, Sonny Gray, we talked about last time. It looks like a decent step for the Cardinals, I think, and we'll see if Bloom can keep it up.
Yeah, that Sonny Gray trade, Brian. It's just a perfect example of what you have to do if you want to try to turn things around quickly. You have to take a swing. If you're going to trade Sonny Gray and you're going to eat a lot of money, you have to take a swing at something high end and just hope that it works out.
And you got a filler who can go, step into the rotation. He's not going to be Sonny Gray,
yeah.
But Mr. Fitz, Mr. Fitz will probably fit into the rotation.
He fits right in, Brian.
There you go. Okay, Kyle, moving right on.
No, but like real fast, just as a comparison, and it's not the same thing, but like I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Jaime Garcia is not Sonny Gray. He was not Sonny Gray. He was starting to fall apart before the Cardinals traded him to the Braves. But when the Cardinals traded Jaime Garcia to the Braves, like they got three middling prospects for him. It was Dykstra, Ellis, and the other person I'm forgetting, and I'm embarrassed by it. But it was like there was nothing there that you thought, oh, that could actually be major league impact. You were hoping that they could develop in the organization and maybe get to the majors. That's not what they did here with Sonny Gray. They got a major league arm of some varying level in Richard Fitz, and then they also got just a supremely talented something else. And I think that's kind of where I've been as I've tried to assess and quantify and categorize the Sonny Gray trade. I think it's a sign of how things are going.
And, we're going to have to decide where Brandon Clark, and that's the name, of course, we've been alluding to here, is going to fit in. I think he's definitely going to be in my top 10. I would imagine he'll be in yours too. And we'll just have to see where he goes. That'll be a little work for us as we continue to our next subject, which is the rollout of the Cardinal Nation's top 50 prospect list, which hopefully you've been following along. Every day we have a new player. And the way these rankings occurred, Kyle and I did our rankings separately, and then we basically just averaged them together. And in a number of cases, we're pretty close on guys. And in some other cases, we're not. And every fifth article, so 50, 45, 40, 35, you get the pattern. Or if you don't, you need remedial math. Those every five ones are free, so you can get a feeling for the kind of content that Kyle's delivering in his scouting reports. And I sort of provide the wrapper around it to say, where's this guy? Where'd he come from? Where's he been, and where do we think he's going to go? So, make sure you check that out. Check out those articles. Kyle, last time we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I think at that time we were probably around the 45 or so. In the last 10 or so, we dropped. Uh, who do you want to talk about? Who's on your mind that we've covered here in the last week or two?
Well, Brian, I'll tell you, I think that one thing that's been really interesting about the way that our list have combined is it's kind of stacked interesting prospects on top of interesting prospects. So, like, we had Josh Kross and Jack Gurevitch, two first base only prospects who go about it opposite ways, prospect 37 and 38, respectively.
Yes.
And I think that's been really fascinating. Of course, I think we could talk about Michael Watson, the left-handed relief pitcher, who I think could actually be a more effective, a more interesting version of John King right now.
And by the
Um,
way, I was more aggressive. I was surprised. I was more aggressive on Watson than you were. And I was
yeah,
thinking, wow, but Watson was exceptional at Springfield. I mean,
yeah.
he was exceptional all year long, but he's another one of these guys who quietly, got two promotions during the year and, kind of came on the radar out of nowhere.
Brian, the only thing that's again, it's with all these guys and Andre Granillo too, who was today, and I want to talk about that real quick. And well, of course, I would love to talk about Gurevitch and Cross, but Watson's interesting because I've got this like built up in my head now where I'm just worried that some of these guys, when they get to Major League Baseball, are going to regress. And so anybody who I've kind of dinged anybody who hasn't made a AAA debut, but also dinged guys who have made AAA debuts, and also been very I guess, picky about what I'm doing and, just trying to go for extreme stuff. But I'm with you. Like, I'm really impressed with Mike Watson. I will real fast about Andre Granillo. The
Yeah,
thing about
let's
Granillo,
talk about him a little bit because you're a little pessimistic on him. And Andre Granillo turned it around a year ago.
yeah,
His trend was like this. He
yeah,
went to Memphis and he kicked butt. I mean, he
yeah,
was excellent. And his biggest problem was walks, and his biggest problem was left-handed batters. And he fixed both those things. And he made it to St. Louis. He
mhm,
wasn't the best, but he was better than Munoz and Graceffo and a bunch of the other guys, Roy Croft, who got time. So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing what Andre Gurriel can do if he can find another pitch to go with a slider, right?
That's it. That's it. That's the key. I love the fact that Andre Granillo ended up being a free article because it's the perfect example of what I think you and I bring that maybe is very unique. And it's each of our perspectives because we've both been around for quite some time. We've both seen how this all works. And it also, because we've been around, like we have conflicting thoughts about Granillo, and really we're saying the same thing. It's just that there's pessimism and optimism in different numbers, right? Like for you, he's a 21st, I think, and I had him at like 47th. I love that. I love that wide delta. It shows again all the things that we talk about here about everybody evaluates things differently. It's not about like they're right, they're wrong. It's about an aggregation of knowledge and information. And but for me, it's that simple. It's I didn't do a good job in the article of saying it, but I give him a ton of praise for the I guess the progress he's made throwing strikes. What I worry about most is again he needs to get to more velocity and more movement on his fastball. And it's tough when you say that because you're talking about a 94.7 mile an hour fastball on average.
Yeah, but the problem is Major League hitters can time a 94.5 mile an hour fastball and punish it.
That's it. Without movement. Matt Swanson got to more sinker movement, got to more sink on his sinker, and that's part of why he got more effective. That slider is a major league pitch. It is. But when it's your only major league pitch and you're not Mariano Rivera throwing the cutter, it doesn't matter. So really if he can get a feel for that changeup, and we've seen him in Memphis with the AAA ball throw a really devastating, or maybe not devastating. I think that's probably a
You mean with the
mischaracterization.
Major League ball?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen him throw an effective curveball or effective changeup to lefties. It just that he doesn't have a feel for it. He doesn't throw it consistently, misses the zone pretty bad with it a lot, or he'll live in the zone with it too much. If he can just continue to work on the feel for that changeup and get to the point where he trusts it and get it to the point where the Cardinals trust his command with it, then maybe I mean, there's a real good chance at that point I'm way off on my ranking, and you're maybe even off because that's a potentially top end reliever, especially if you can get to a little bit more velocity and a little bit more movement on his fastball. So again, part of it is just I I'm just being pessimistic more than anything. But
That's
no,
hey, and that's okay. That's okay. There's no, like you said, there's no wrong or right. Hey, let's go back to these first basemen a little bit. Is there any more? I mean, because you never really got to say all you wanted to say about Gurevitch and Josh Kross. Josh Kross being the man of extremes for you, right? He's good,
yeah,
maybe, but bad here, good here, bad here, good here.
yeah, I got a butt in there on your articles, Brian. No,
Yes,
so
you
it's really
did.
that's the kind of thing with Josh Cross, right? Like,
Big butts, big butts. I can't lie.
yes, we won't deny it either. The thing about Josh Cross that I find particularly interesting, Brian, is that just like you said, just like we talked in the article, like I feel like everything that I point out where I'm like, I'm really excited about this. The opposite thing, like in his profile, drags him back down, Brian. It's like, that power's there, but it's only from one side of the plate. And we started to see him, struggle with some off speed stuff. And then, I've always been concerned about his mechanics, on his front, yeah, whether left or right handed he's swinging on his front foot, he just kind of like pivots and turns, similar to how Jim Edmonds used to use his lower body, but without the balance shift. Well, we saw with working with the Cardinals hitting brass, he started to incorporate a kick time, a kick timing motion in his mechanics, and that actually really helped out his right-handed swing. I think towards the end of the year, he was a useless hitter, and I don't use those words lightly. He was a
Well, he
useless
was
hitter.
injured. He was on the injured list, so of course he was useless. That I know that's not,
Ah,
I know that's not what you meant, but
yeah, yeah, you're right. To be fair, you're right. But he was not a useful hitter swinging the bat right-handed, and he got to it. Towards the end before he got injured in the season. So there's a lot of things there that are exciting. He's limited by his athleticism. If he had this profile at the plate and was a plus catcher, then this would be something honestly like I bet he would move up our list another 7 or 10 spots, maybe, because there's power in a profile for a catcher, but he doesn't seem to have the ability to stay at catcher long term. Doesn't mean he won't. Just what we've seen so far does not point to a catcher long term. It points to a first baseman long term,
and he's
and
got to
that
be
hurts his profile.
he's got to be a more complete hitter. Let's face it, to be a major league first baseman.
That's it.
Now Gurevitch came in, and I was kind of hoping, I was looking for positive things to say about Jack Gurevitch, and he played his full collegiate season, came in, and as his time with Palm Beach went on, he struggled more and more and more. Whereas the September he was like 1 for 19 with 11 strikeouts. But
Yeah.
again, we got to give a guy a mulligan for having played a full college season, and then comes in and reports. What causes you to be optimistic about Gurevitch?
Well, there's some natural athleticism in his swing. He from the left side, he just gets to everything. Like he can stay on breaking pitches. He has good barrel control. He makes good swing decisions. Um, there's power there. Like he's hit some moonshots, Brian, and he's also put up some pretty impressive exit velocities with both wooden and metal bats. So those are the things that keep me really excited. I've seen him fight off opposite field or balls on the breaking really tough breaking pitches on the outer corner to the opposite field in pitchers counts. Like there's an advanced approach there that a lot, like I think I put it in the article, that a lot of third round picks don't have. Like normally with the advanced approach, you don't get that out of a 21-year-old collegiate first baseman. It's just a matter of how he grows into his power and how he continues to adjust to high heat and high fastball velocity. Because part of the reason why he struggled at Palm Beach was teams got caught on to the fact that in college he struggled to hit fastballs above 93 miles an hour. So they just started giving him a lot of fastballs up in the zone at 95 plus, and he really struggled with it. Never mind, he could do pretty much anything he wanted to against breaking pitches. So that's the big key for him.
All right, there you have it. Jack Gurevitch, and before that, Josh Kross. Two of the guys that are currently ranked number 38 and number 37 in our top 50 prospect countdown. New articles every day. Come and see the free ones, and please subscribe to read them all. And we will be back on the 10th with another episode. And again, thank you for finding us in our new locations here on the major podcast apps. And we promise that we're going to continue to entertain and hopefully deliver good information about the Cardinals minor leagues every week. Any closing comments, Kyle?
I don't even want to say what I'm saying right now. You nailed it, Brian.
All right, then. Thanks for listening and watching, everyone. And until next week.